I'm Rick Maddison from Kelowna Now Live, here with Allan Willcocks. And Allan, thank you so much for coming in. Let's give you a bit of background on Allan Willcocks. He's a registered professional forester, 40 years. And Allan, you looked after a very large region in Ontario. Do you want to just dive into that a bit and explain what that entailed for you?
Yeah, I worked in the northwest region of Ontario as the director, and for the Ministry of Natural Resources and Forestry. I was responsible for all the Crown land management, resource management like wildlife, and emergency manager like fire, floods, and that sort of thing. And basically it was about 85% of the land base of that part of Ontario. And the whole idea with Natural Resources Ontario was to have an integrated approach to managing their resources through that ministry. And that integrated approach meant that forest fire management, which is part of my management team, they had to work with us land and resource managers to ensure that this very fire-prone area didn't all burn up, for one thing, but also it whatever happened, it minimized the damage to our goals or maximized the benefits and prescribed fire to our goals.
So during your time there, how long was it?
Well, it's about 7.5 years.
So during that time, did you have any structure fires?
No, not that I can remember. If there were nothing serious,
so
maybe a log cabin.
But during that entire time, I mean, that's incredible that you didn't have any structure fires during. And that sounds like that landmass is massive.
Yeah, it's also got some major cities like Thunder Bay, Kenora, Dryden, and many, many communities, First Nations communities in the far north.
So during this time, you managed to really protect the area. It sounds very well. You had some practices in place. Right now, you are retired and living in West Kelowna. Mm-hmm. So let's take us back to that moment. And this is part of our discussion. You were walking your dog at 6 a.m. This last summer, and you saw a plume of smoke. Now, given your legacy of work, given your experience, you thought and you had several thoughts as you saw this plume of smoke. Let's dive into that a bit. What was happening?
Well, I knew there was a forest fire 5 kilometers from my house or so, upstream, because I was on the same river, McDougall Creek, essentially 100 meters from it. And I realized, and the other thing I saw was absolutely no response to it. And it was 6 in the morning. And that's exactly when I would have expected, because we knew the wind was coming too. It was pretty well still then. And I would have expected, in my world, 3 or 4 tankers on that thing, dropping up to 700,000 liters per day on that thing. So each tanker.
Each tanker?
Each tanker, yeah. And the other thing I know is, from my experience and it's quite extensive in that region, because I was camped out. I would have been camped out in a fire center if we were at extreme critical fire indices. I would have been there, and there's no way we would have allowed that to happen in our world, because it's we had a 30 to 40 kilometer buffer around all the major centers. And we had a reaction time of 1 to 2 1 hour usually, but up to 2 hours.
So when you say that, you had a reaction time of 1 hour to 2 hours, depending on where the location is.
Right by the city, yeah.
So what did you see? So you saw the plume of smoke. When did you start seeing or hearing about any activity?
I didn't see anything all morning much. I wasn't watching it too much, but I did see the thing really blow up in the afternoon when the wind came. But I also know, too, from my experience, is that plume already showed to me from where I was sitting, because I wasn't over top of it with an aircraft, which I've been many times, is that fire was probably more than 1 or 2 hectare fire that we normally attack initially, right? Mm-hmm. So It wasn't a young fire, and so I heard later that they had detected this fire at about 6 o'clock the previous evening through whatever public detection, because they don't have any aerial detection aircraft. So my guess is that fire was probably there 12 to 24 hours before I saw that plume. No action.
So, sorry, back up a bit. You said that BC Wildfire Service doesn't have an aerial detection aircraft?
No, we had 10 of them. When in any kind of critical fire situation, the high indices, extreme, our aircraft would do grids in our region in the areas that we deemed high priority for forest fire fighting every day.
Every day?
Yes, we had a contract every day, yeah, and with them. And you can't see, the problem is you can't depend on WestJet or the public to identify fires very well and timely. And the other thing is, when you identify a fire, what you have to do is have the observer in the aircraft actually observe the fire and see what it's doing, how big it is, how fast it's spreading, etc. You can't do it from the ground or from inexperienced eyes. So you have to pounce, especially on areas where it could go into the city really quick. You have to pounce on those fires, particularly in the situations we have now in our fire ecosystem in Kelowna is absolutely out of control from a point of view of danger right now because it's so dry.
So it sounds like when you were in Ontario, you had a policy or let's call it a machine in place, mm-hmm. which sounded like you would do quick deployment.
Yeah.
You would identify a fire,
mm-hmm.
quick deployment.
Mm-hmm.
Probably it sounds like you would have an aerial detection.
Yep.
Then you'd probably send these bombers. You were telling me, what kind of bombers were they?
Well, the ones we had, which are incredible bombers used worldwide, are CL-415s and the Canadair. Now de Havilland's making the 515s, which are even better with infrared and everything. And the first 20 of them are being sold to Europe, which is ridiculous. We need them here.
Where are they made?
They're actually parts of it's made in Victoria, mm-hmm. and parts of it in Calgary.
Oh wow!
Yeah, so it's we should be building. We should have another 100 of them in this country, but we don't have any in British Columbia. We rent one occasionally, but it's usually used for the main fire. See, the difference between the machine I had, fire machine I had, which was, and the reason why that fire machine occurred, is we knew 25 years ago, especially in a boreal forest, once fire starts, and if it gets big enough, there's no way you can put it out. You have to, unless the rain puts it out. So you have to stop them really quick. And we had a 96% success rate on when we put them out quick. They don't go anywhere.
96%.
96%, yeah. And we budgeted for that, actually. So what we had is, and it costs money, but it saves a lot of destruction, is we have a very intense and somewhat expensive initial attack program. I had in my region 6 415 water bombers, plus many other craft, as well as retardant bombers, helicopters, etc. And so they basically, their role was to deal with initial attack. And in the Thunder Bay area, you can expect those bombers, at least the first one, and the crew, what we call the initial attack crew, that basically surrounds the fire. They go in with a helicopter and they surround the fire. Mm-hmm. There's some pretty hilly areas if you know Thunder Bay. So not a whole lot different than here, that's for sure. They will surround the fire, and the bombers will come in, and those people would work all day and camp out at night and work the next day. They wouldn't leave it until the fire is out.
Now, don't we have a policy, and again, this is just my knowledge, cursory knowledge of the BC Wildfire Service policy, but aren't they at 10 a.m. to 6 p.m.? Isn't that their... Yeah,
that's what I hear, but it wouldn't work for firefighting where I was anyways. It just wouldn't work because you can't... I have seen one occasion where we put a fire out with the bombers, and there was no initial attack crews. And we thought, oh, it's out. We don't need to send the attack crews. And it almost burned down Prince Albert, Saskatchewan in 2003. We had other little tools that we had in our array of tools. We had 12 tankers that basically kept the fire at bay in a big 1 kilometer buffer between the really bad jack pine forest in the city. We evacuated a lot of people. We never lost one structure, amazingly enough.
So, but I just want to unpack this a bit.
Sure.
You said we don't have the bomber capabilities or bombers in BC currently, from your knowledge.
Well, I mean, they get in here sometime. I've seen them here, but they're not. The problem is, Rick, the way I see it, and I've been watching fires in this valley for 5 or 6 years now. It's not this one this year wasn't the first one. Mm-hmm. I can name several others, and the Mount Law was another one where they let it sit for a while, and then are almost burnt up Glen Rosa, And so I think the thing is they don't have a real initial attack program, not the one that I'm used to, where where I had 54-man crews, and I had 6 415s and access to a whole bunch more, by the way. I had 6 there, but I could get more if I needed it. There's another 3 that were pretty close by that I could get as well. But that whole cost, when I did it for Saskatchewan with a bunch of colleagues, because we were losing lots of areas because we didn't have initial attack in Saskatchewan, we made an initial attack program. The cost at the time, a number of years ago, I think was around $90 million up front. Right? Mm-hmm. So there's a lot of money up front, but the point of the matter is we lost, last I heard, $700 million of insurance claims here, tourism industry, the grapes. There was $1 billion loss here, and I can tell you, if we didn't have initial attack in northwestern Ontario, which is known for its fires, we would have the same issue. And the worst part of it is, of course, is if you only got a $200 million budget and you end up spending $700 or $800 million, there's something wrong. And you say, well, just a bad year. Let's roll the dice for the next year. Well, everybody knows what's going on. We have a real dry, kind of sick forest here, over-mature, decadent. As a professional forester here in BC for 40 years, like I've actually practiced forestry here and fought fires here in BC. So I know sick trees when I see them. Doesn't matter what province I've worked in. We have a tinderbox here. If we have another, we've had a drought here in our city here since probably I'm guessing around June of last year, including in the winter. So we have dry trees out there right now, and it's going to be an early fire season unless we get the rains that we always hope to get. So I'm just saying that this particular situation, if they don't have a strong initial attack program, I don't care if they buy the bombers or whatever, what kind of planes they get, as long as they get 2 or 3 million liters on those small fires a day, I don't care what they are. But the thing is, you have to hit them real fast. Everybody who's fought fires, really fought fires, knows that if you get it early, it's out.
So a couple of things, just based on what you just said. What is your prediction for the 2024 fire season? Are you suggesting we're going to be in for the same kind of thing? And
Well, let's put it this way. There's 2 things. Our forests are just as bad as they were last year. And they're decadent, and they're full of dead material, and there's lots of load on those forests. Remember here, we used to have forest fires in the valley every 15 to 20 years. Now we've held it back through ironically successful fire control. But now they're big, and just like California with all that woody material, they're very flammable, and there's lots of stuff to burn. And the other thing is, particularly in our area, in West Kelowna and Kelowna, those fires that we had last August and September, they have not totally burnt those areas. And there's tons of material there, and it's tinder dry. And if we don't get rain, lots of rain in the spring, or even a normal rain in the spring, we're going to have a bad year. And if we don't have the capability of attacking these fires right within, especially in Kelowna, within an hour of the thing starting, and not when they discover it, but when the thing starts, we're going to have trouble. I've seen through 7.5 years of sitting in a fire center in critical times, doing my job as a director, I've seen this situation many, many times where we've had really bad fire indices, high, extreme, and just as bad as here. Mm-hmm. And we've controlled the fires because we've had the crews, 50 crews, 4-person crews, and these are very elite firefighters, well trained, really well trained, and we've had the air attack and like those 415s are absolutely remarkable firefighting bombers, and I'm sure there's others who'll say something's better. I haven't seen anything better, and I've used just about all of them in my long career.
So going back, are those crews from Ontario or are those contracted workers?
We have we have the initial 50 crews, and at least in my region, there's more, and I might be out by 5 or 10, but it's around 50. So there's also hundreds of other people that we train that are in the communities too. So some of them are in the initial attack, what they call level 1, but a lot of them are level 2. So once we get a fire going in our world, it's really hard to stop it. But when the weather changes and we get a few days of rain, we can do some mop-up, and that's when those crews go in. The problem, I think, with the BC government wildfire service, the problem I see with them is two things. One, I don't think they don't appear to be very integrated with working with locals fighting the fire, and they'll claim publicly that they don't protect structures. We did. We had structural specialists, and that's why we don't lose. We've had big fires coming up to structures in towns, and we've put the wall of water, etc., and we've protected lots of structures. I've flown over places where the structures have been protected, everything's burned, and there's my crew waving at me when I'm in a helicopter or something, and they got all the sprinklers up, and the crews have saved those homes or tourist establishment. So I guess the thing about it is integration with the community, especially First Nation communities. Like we had fire crews right in the First Nation communities because a lot of the times they're really isolated. Mm-hmm. So it was an integration thing. So yeah, we had the crack guys and gals that went in for the initial attack, but we also had to have hundreds of other people, and we didn't go to South Africa. We had our own people. Sometimes we would bring in other crews, but the problem with bringing other crews sometimes is they don't have the same training as those people do, or the same kind of doctrine of fighting forest fires. We fight forest fires with water. BC, they tend to fight more with picks and shovels because they don't always have water here.
Well, didn't you tell me that with the West Kelowna fire, they drove up to the site?
Well, look, this is hearsay. So I was told that they had a 3-person crew in a pickup truck, and it took them 3 hours to get to the McDougall fire. If somebody wants to say that's not true, that's okay. But that's what I've heard from multiple sources. And probably, I'm guessing, in that morning after I walked my dog, that's way too late. And then they said there was 50-hectare fire, so that fits. There's no way you can put out a 50-hectare fire when the wind's coming up. There's no way.
Right.
You know, you're in deep trouble. And that's the other thing this organization appears to do, Rick. It appears to put all their money into fighting the big fires.
Right.
Okay, so this is an interesting contrast between I fought fires here in British Columbia, and I know how firefighting works in British Columbia. I worked for industry when the day was that on a tree farm license, and that was when we actually fought the fires and did the prescribed fire. I've done lots and lots of that. But the neat thing about back then was in the mosaic complex, and it's very complex, it's very different than the boreal forests anywhere else. But you have a complex of hills and mountains, etc. You got wet forest, you got dry forest. You can often do backburns and you can do prescribed fire, and it buffers into a wet forest. and everything's good. You can stop things and actually fight the fire, but not now. These wet forests are now dry. And it's going through those forests. I heard one BC guy say, I've never seen conditions like that. Well, yeah, it's because suddenly the forests that aren't supposed to burn are burning, and they're burning hot. So it's really hard for them to do backburns or fight the fires. Their whole thing was doing backburns to fight these fires, and there probably was some effectiveness. We never did it in the Boreal. I guess we did. We did prescribe fire in the Boreal, but very limited, because you start messing around in the Boreal, especially in the jack pine, it's high risk.
Right.
It's just plain high risk.
So there's a few things I want to ask you before we finish up here today. And by the way, thank you again for giving us this information.
Sure.
And I would say to the BC Wildfire Service, if they ever want to come in and speak to why their policies are the way they are, I invite them in. I really do. Al, let's talk a bit about the meeting per se. If we were to get the Premier in a room with you, what would you ask him tomorrow? Because I love this region.
So do I.
You've moved here. You love the region as well. What I love about what you're saying is there's no skin in the game for you.
No.
Like you're retired.
No.
This is just merely someone with the vast amount of experience, a model that worked in Ontario, and just trying to bring that knowledge forward. So what would you tell the Premier tomorrow if you could have a meeting set up?
Well, simply to look at his machine, the firefighting machine, and change it from a smart car maybe into a Dodge Ram truck, four-wheel drive, because the roads right now are really bumpy and a smart car doesn't work. In other words, what I'm saying is you got to rejig that machine significantly in a practical sense. And I've done this also. If you look at my CV, I've done this. I've done business planning for government and change whole organizations using business planning. Basically setting your goals, costing them all out, costing out initial tax, costing what you're spending on forest firefighting, which when it goes crazy, like the $700 million, you just get an emergency management, no problem, right? That's what they do. They don't have to go to the legislature and say, I need $400 million, I'll get $200 million, but then it's going to be really $700 million. With the seasons we're going to get, we're going to see $700 million being spent, maybe $1 billion, and all the losses. So what I would say to the Premier is put the money up front, do a business plan analysis, bring in people that do this other model that they've done in the province for other provinces for years. Put them in with the BC Wildfire Service guys that are going to be really reluctant to change because they think they are the best. Well, I don't think they are, but they think they are. And then sit down and take the key away. And come and with a professional facilitator for business plans, come up with a business plan model that for the British Columbia Wildfire Service that we can present to the Premier with options. Simple as that. It's not hard, and I've done it before personally, and I think that if you do that, first of all, everybody with any sanity will really realize you got to put a lot of money up front. Maybe it's $300 million a year, but your budget's not going to go crazy to $800, $900 million, because hundreds of fires we had in my region could have been big fires, burning towns and everything, was stopped cold because we had aerial detection, and probably you can use drones now, but aerial detection, and we had really strong initial attack with professional crews, and we did not use those bombers very much for the big fires because the big fires are gone, see ya, kind of thing. Especially when one fire guy used to say, "Well, Al, today it's going to rock and roll for a day or two. We're just going to stand back and watch it."
Right.
And that's what you do.
You mentioned in a previous conversation you had with the West Kelowna mayor that I think you were half joking and you said, right now, the way it seems is that if the West Kelowna Fire Department was to respond, say in a couple hours to any kind of fire that they've heard about, that's what you're looking at with the Wildfire Service is this delayed response to fires. And I think that was a great metaphor that you're using, which is
Yeah.
If you're going to get on the fires, you got to get on the fires and respond quickly.
Yeah, I think one thing I haven't said very well, and I said it to the mayor when I talked to him, was that the West Kelowna fire chief did a great job. He had his act together, and he brought in a lot of other people. Structural protection, I mean, he lost some houses, but he did a great job. And the West Kelowna Fire Department and the Kelowna Fire Department, I've seen them in action for the last 5 years. There's been a number of fires you may have noticed when you're driving into work in the forest, and the fire trucks are there right away including around my house, by the way. I almost lost a few houses in my subdivision. They were there within 4 to 5 minutes, and they had the fire out. If they had to wait it for 20 or 30 minutes, that fire would have raced up the hill and taken out a whole bunch of homes.
Right.
So they are actually practicing what I'm saying the BC Wildfire Service has to practice. And folks, it's going to cost them some money, but it's a hell of a lot cheaper than the $700 million they're paying this year. You got first of all, you got to accept the climate change and the condition of the forest, et cetera, is happening here, and that we need to have an initial attack program like we accepted in the 80s, by the way, that we can't control this stuff the way we're doing it now. So we did an initial attack program. And in the 1990s in Saskatchewan, same thing. We said we had all these bad years, the 1995 fires. We had to put a program in place to stop this. Those bombers sitting in my tarmac, those 6 bombers, and the crews associated, they put out, I'm not exaggerating, thousands of fires, in the time I was there, and many of them could have been very dangerous fires to our communities.
Now, I've heard this term fire smart, and we're going to have to, I'd love to talk to you all day, Al, about this. This is great stuff. Talk to me about the fire smart program that I've heard about in BC.
Well, the thing about fire smart, I think it's, I've been talking fire smart to all my relatives for years. I mean, there's a lot of great stuff, and people got to adhere to it, but what happens if your neighbor doesn't, right? Your neighbor's house isn't going to just burn. Your house will burn too. I think the thing about it is we have to get smart about fire smart, and maybe we got to, especially the houses that are perched on top of those hills surrounded by ponderosa pine, maybe they're going to have to get serious about sprinkler systems and almost a mandated fire smart program. Or frankly, I'm told by insurance people that it's going to be very hard to get insurance for any of those houses on top of those mountains. We get more fires like this, try to get insurance. It's the thing about fire smart is it's a hit and miss thing right now, and it sounds good and everything they're saying is correct, but there are people in town that will actually really fire smart your house, and that includes sprinklers on the roof, when a fire, but the problem, of course, then the city's going to have to think about it as water pressure too, so there needs to be some significant thought put into real fire smart, in the sense that you are actually going to help the fire department, and so they don't rush around with all their sprinklers, that you actually have sprinklers pop up and can protect your subdivision without their help, because sometimes they're not going to get there. And that's what happened this year. They saved hundreds of homes, but they didn't save them all because, they only got so many guys and so many sprinklers.
Okay, Allan, I'm going to stop it there, but I got to say this time has been great. I think our overarching goal, if there is one today, is getting this information out there, providing more perspectives. Hopefully, at some point, maybe they'll look proactive versus reactive, and we'll be a lot further ahead.
Well, bottom line, there is a solution here, but it takes leadership to get to that solution, and it's going to cost some money. If you don't go after this solution, we're going to be paying every summer.
On that note, we will stop. Rick Maddison for Kelowna Now Live. Thank you so much for watching.